preparedness to joining the war. So we've been looking at all of the parts of America being neutral during the Great War, and so now we're starting to lean away more and more towards that neutrality, and you're going to see that. When it comes to preparedness, many politicians, such as like Teddy Roosevelt, advocated for this kind of a program of preparedness, which would have been things like expanding the armed forces or establishing universal military training and such, because those politicians were basically convinced that an Allied victory was of national interest and therefore America should intervene. That being said, interventionists really make up a very small part of the population. Most Americans were really sure that the United States would not join in the war and actually opposed these kind of military preparations because they were so expensive. The thing is, most Americans really supported the peace movement. We even see this with like the Women's Peace Party, formed in 1915. We get the American League to Limit Armaments during this time period. The thing is, a lot of the peace movement was focused specifically on if there was military spending, that might undermine some of the domestic reform because money would be going towards that military spending rather than domestic issues. Or if it didn't undermine the domestic reform, it would mean raised taxes to pay for all of it. But then, of course, you have to look at the actual leaders. So the thing is, Wilson at this time, he initially opposed preparedness. However, with the intensifying German submarine warfare, he decides to go for a route that's a bit more towards preparedness while keeping America neutral, because then no one could blame him of like neglecting the national defense when it came to his re-election in 1916. However, the fact that there's so much opposition against preparedness, there's so many people that don't want that military spending, that actually means that Woodrow Wilson, for instance, would drop a proposal for a National Reserve Force, but his preparedness will include things like the National Defense Act, which would increase the strength of the Army, and the Naval Construction Act, which authorized a naval construction program. Which brings us to the election of 1916, which we have seen before this point, because we've seen it with the whole progressive reforms and everything, looking at progressive era Wilson. But the other part of this election is that Woodrow Wilson is really going to, while stress things like Americanism and preparedness, he's really going to emphasize peace. In fact, one of his big slogans in this election is, "He kept us out of the war." So you see this tying in with like the peace rallies of this time period. The thing is, the Republicans are going to be a bit divided when it comes to this election. A lot of progressives had joined back up, but many of the progressives had joined the Democrats, especially with Woodrow Wilson's change and adopting a lot of those more social progressive reforms. Then you have Teddy Roosevelt. The thing is, Teddy Roosevelt really was an interventionist, so much so that it actually cost him the nomination in the GOP. And instead, they're going to put forward Charles Evans Hughes, who was a Supreme Court justice and a former New York governor. The problem is, Teddy Roosevelt has a really big personality. He has a very large stage presence, so to speak. And Teddy Roosevelt has not been quiet. He has attacked vocally Woodrow Wilson for not pursuing more of a war policy. And so the fact that Teddy Roosevelt is such an interventionist and so many people associated Teddy Roosevelt with the Republican Party means that a lot of voters start viewing the Republican Party as the war party. That being said, this election was the closest in decades. So Woodrow Wilson has won re-election. He's trying to avert war. In fact, he wanted to bring peace to Europe. And so in 1917, he's going to sketch out terms of, and I quote, peace without victory. Basically, Woodrow Wilson and many others were really concerned that if there was an overwhelming victory really for either side, that all it would do is lead to another war. Hopefully you're already going, well, I know where that's going to go because this is World War I, and we know what's going to come after it. However, as much as he has these terms, neither side, neither the Central Powers or the Allied powers were interested. Both sides had felt like they'd sacrificed too much, and they wanted like actual territory concessions and everything. So they're really in this deadlock over in Europe. And so to break this deadlock, Germany is going to resume unrestricted submarine warfare. The thing is, this really felt like it was necessary to the German people, because by 1917, it's something like you have over 100 German civilians dying every day, and a lot of this is specifically because of the British blockade. And so Germany knows by resuming unrestricted submarine warfare, this might pull America into the war. But they hoped that even if America did declare war on them, they couldn't do much in the short run, and they hoped that before America could really get involved, Germany could cut off the Allies from United States supplies and basically end the war faster. So with this unrestricted submarine warfare, Wilson is pushed into a corner. He basically has to break off diplomatic relations with Germany. He is also then going to go to Congress and ask them to arm merchant ships. The thing is, Congress is going to refuse to do this. This is how much people wanted peace in America and didn't want to get involved in this war. That being said, Woodrow Wilson's going to just go on to invoke the anti-piracy law of 1819, and he would arm merchant ships anyway. From there, he also ordered naval gun crews to fire at submarines on sight. So America is still neutral, but this is now a policy of what they called armed neutrality. So they'll shoot on sight with submarines, they're arming their merchant vessels, things like that. Still, even with this issue, rallies across the United States are demanding peace. And then there's a shift in public opinion. This shift really comes from the Zimmerman note or Zimmerman telegram. What happened was the German foreign minister Arthur Zimmerman sent a telegram to the German minister in Mexico. This telegram would have proposed that if the United States joined in the Great War and joined it on the Allied side, that Mexico should also join in the war on the German side, on the Central Power side. And in exchange, when Germany and Mexico won the war, Mexico could recover their last territory of like Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. So this is a big deal because this potentially could bring the war to our doorstep. Now, it's really complicated how America got this intercepted telegram. Basically, British intelligence got the telegram, decoded it, and but they couldn't just give it to America, because if British intelligence said, oh, we found this telegram A, that would give away how they decoded these messages that they were managing to intercept from Germany. But also, it would have looked like the British just made this up to make America join in on the British side in the Great War. So they had to like really be careful about it. They acted like there was multiple telegrams sent so that it made sense how America could have intercepted this and so on and so forth. And so when America gets this telegram, there's an element of, is this real or not? And so literally they ask Zimmerman, was this legit? And all he had to do was say no. But instead he says yes and admits that Germany sent this telegram to Mexico. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, everything going on with this war and everything. Anyway, with the Zimmerman telegram being intercepted and everything, now there's a lot more hostility towards Germany. This is really going to increase support for intervention in the war. Plus, it's around this time you get the Russian Revolution, which overthrows the Tsarist regime there and everything. And so now Americans are like, okay, they're a fit partner. We could fight alongside, Russians now. Plus, on top of that, some submarines are going to sink some 4 American freighters in mid-March. So we've got all this anti-German feeling just coming together. And on April 2nd of 1917, Woodrow Wilson will deliver a war message declaring that neutrality was no longer possible. He will talk about joining the war and that America's goals in this war were simple. They were noble goals. That America wasn't fighting to conquer. America wasn't fighting to dominate. No, America was fighting to bring an ultimate peace around the world. This is the war to end all wars, peace after, bring liberation to all the peoples of the world. And this kind of message is going to win over even more people, such as idealists, who a lot of times were progressives during this time period. That being said, there were still people that opposed it, even in Congress. We see things like individuals like Robert Lafayette, who was a senator, and Senator George Norris. They actually tried to urge the Senate to hold a popular referendum on the war. So this would have made people in America go vote at the polling stations and say, yes, we want to join, or no, we don't. They were unsuccessful. This did not happen. You get a vigorous debate, though, and in the end, the Senate will pass war resolutions, and the House will as well. And so on April 6th of 1917, the United States will officially enter the Great War. So I ask you this, already knowing that, yes, America ended up when joining the war. Do you think it was inevitable that America was going to get involved in the war? And do you think that we were inevitably going to be on the Allied side? However, I don't want to ask inevitable. The thing is, when you say something is inevitable, it takes all of the human agency out of the equation, because at any time, America could have said, no, we're just not going to get involved, no matter what. Even if they bomb us or anything like that, we're not going to get involved. That technically could have happened. So instead, what I'm asking you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it was America would ever get involved in this war? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it was that America would have been on the Allied side if they were going to get involved in this war?